Today is our first week without our beloved Katie as a co-host, which is very sad. But it's also really exciting because it's the start of a new chapter. And our first guest is my partner, Will. Hi, Will.
Hello. It's an honor to be here. Good.
Thank you for being here. So the reason I have asked Will to be the first guest on the Once Upon a Binge podcast is partly because I've mentioned you a lot, Will. You have popped up in conversation. So I think for listeners who've been listening for a while, there may be some familiarity with you and your name. So it's probably quite nice to put a face to the name.
Okay.
And also because you have some experience with disordered eating and body image yourself. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's good definitions to use. I wouldn't have used it at the time, but as the years have gone by and the more you've learned and passed your wisdom onto me, I would definitely use disordered eating as a definition and body dysmorphia. Yeah.
So I think you can bring some of that experience, which will be nice because we've never had a male guest before. And we do actually have quite a few male listeners. In fact, if our stats are right on YouTube, just over half of our listeners are actually male. That's surprising because I thought it would be predominantly female, but slightly more majority male. So there's obviously males listening and finding what we share valuable. So hopefully you as a male on the show will bring a whole other level to it. And I also really wanted to have you on the podcast because when we both met, I think we were both in disordered eating. We both had body image difficulties. And for me, I can definitely see how meeting you really had a significant positive impact on my recovery. I had done recovery work before meeting you, but I see how the recovery process really accelerated for me when you entered my life. And you've already alluded to yourself that some of the things that I've shared through my recovery has had some impact on you. So I thought it would be hopefully quite a helpful conversation for people to hear how our relationships with food and body image changed through being in relation with each other.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot to go into, really.
Yeah. So where do you want to start, Will?
Oh, should we start with maybe where I was when we first met each other?
Yeah, absolutely.
Start
Where
there?
were you? Where would you say you were?
The diet I subscribed to at the time was a vegan diet, and that's actually how we met, wasn't it? I don't know if you spoke about it, but we met at a vegan restaurant where we were both working. Yeah, I was a vegan, but I really bigged myself up on the fact I was like a vegan did it, and that's in quotation marks, not to use your phrases. But yeah, I didn't eat oils, and it was all whole food, plant-based, and no mock meats, all that kind of stuff. And I was really having a bit of a chip on my shoulder for that.
Was what for you doing it right meant?
Yeah, that it was like a superiority thing, and definitely a big part of my identity, what I built my whole life around at the time. But obviously there was, when we talk about the disordered eating side of things, I was definitely binge eating as well, but on foods that I demonize to people in conversation and make out look really good and really proper. But as behind closed doors, those foods were I go to, and I'd eat them in large quantities, quite often as well. But as long as I was like face with people, it was, no, I'm a proper whole foods vegan. So that's the main probably identity of where I was with my food when we first met.
Yeah, and I think what you've described there with that masking is something that a lot of listeners will relate to. And it's something I've spoken about as well on the podcast previously, of putting on this front of being the quote unquote healthy person who everyone looks at and is like, do you eat like that all the time? And kind of that is the identity, but it's actually not real. I also think what might be helpful to mention here, and I'd be interested to see for you, like, where this comes in. You were also a personal trainer when we first, and you are no longer a personal trainer now. So do you want to speak about that at all?
I suppose that's where the moving away from the diet side of things, where I touched on earlier, like the body dysmorphia, that's where that side of like my relationship with food and body image was more ripened. Is that a word, ripened? That's not a word, is it?
Ripen? Rampant?
Rampant?
Maybe.
We'll go
I
with
don't
rampant.
know.
It's more of a thing. Let's just use my
We'll go with
simple
that.
language. Stop pretending I'm a podcaster. Yeah, it was more of a thing because I was, especially when you first starting out as a personal trainer, you've got nothing really there's not really a brand out there other than yourself. And you'd hear and read a phrase where it's like, your body's your billboard. And that play on words come up quite often. So I definitely felt the pressure of that. And the obsession with how I looked, it didn't just become like a personal thing. It was like, got projected out into the world. So I felt like everyone was judging me, and how I came across was like my product. And obviously you want to make people believe you've got a good product, and that comes with having, quote unquote, a good body. So my body image, my relationship with my body image definitely became a lot more complicated as I went into the PC world, definitely.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I mentioned it, because they all seem interconnected for me. Like you said, that veganism was part of your identity and coming across as superior and the person who can follow the quote unquote right vegan diet was all part of that front, because it's similar to in the fitness industry. I think there's a level of pressure put on personal trainers to look like they follow a certain diet or to eat in a certain way. So I wondered if that came into it as well. And it was like the personal training was why that veganism became something that you had to do a particular certain way. Does that make sense?
I think they work together. And what I mean by that is I was vegan, which was at the time at the more up and coming time of veganism. So it was a little bit more the outsider if you're a vegan. It was still that kind of, well, he's a vegan, that kind of mentality. Then couple that with being a PT and someone who's into bodybuilding. So you felt that extra pressure to look a certain way, to like, no, look, I'm not one of those skinny vegans. I still build muscle as a vegan, and that extra pressure built up and just made there was no room for slip ups. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just added.
You know, I remember. Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I just said it. Just added an extra heavy weight to it all.
I remember it was part of your selling point, wasn't it? That you were like, was it powered by plants or something? Was your phrase? I can't remember. It was about you can build muscle whilst being on a vegan diet.
Yeah.
That was the whole message, the whole identity.
Yeah, the powered by plants wasn't really my phrase that I coined myself. Such it was like one of the tops that I used to wear while training. Yeah, to show off that I'm a vegan who's still can lift and all that. I look back though, and if I'm honest, I think it wasn't truly authentic to me. I think I was trying to follow a brand that I'd already seen. Because at the time, so veganism was taking off, and vegan bodybuilding and people who were vegan but had muscle, it was a bit of a shock factor at the time online. Because it was like, oh wow, people can actually do it. And I've always been.
That's the superiority.
Yeah, it was. It was like, well, I can do this, and I can convince myself I look better than you, but doing it the hard way. And it put a proper chip on my shoulder, and one I'm not really proud about. But I was young, and you look back and you think, oh, that wasn't very cool. But it's all about learning experience, isn't it?
Yeah. And like you say, that it was something that was just starting to take off when you got into it. So if you were starting to see a lot of that messaging around online and I know you've always been into physical exercise and movement, and you're a very physical person, just like naturally, like that's your thing. You need to move, right? And you've always done that throughout your life in varying ways and to varying levels of, like, some points here, you can see how there was some disordered aspects to it, but in other ways, the way you move your body is really nourishing for you too. And so if you've always identified with someone that moves your body, and that's one of your attributes, and then you've qualified as a personal trainer and you see all this messaging, I can see why you would end up going down that route. I think for you, how do you make sense of how you ended up creating such an identity around that, and how food took on this role for you in creating some kind of like front? What's your understanding of how that developed and why?
That's quite a good question. I think social media had a big part to play. And I think, and what I mean by that is, as I said earlier, just starting out as a personal trainer, you haven't got much to put out there yet, but you're being told by people that you need to stay consistent online to get followers, get views, and you know how it works on social media. It is something you have to keep putting out on every day, which can be
relentless.
Yeah. But
and I can never keep on top of it.
It's hard work. Yeah, hats off to you. But if you haven't really if you just train an hour and a half a day, and then you have a few clients because you're just starting out, you haven't actually got much to put out on social media. So you make things up essentially, and you're finding little things you can do to just put on your Instagram stories and stuff like that. An easy way of doing that was with food, because you eat every day. So taking photos of nearly every meal I had to just have content that then would mirror itself back to being every meal I have has to be the perfect meal, because everyone's going to be judging what I eat. And I would never find if I was having one of those moments where I was having lots of chocolate and lots of cake, whatever it was. I wouldn't post those, but all those perfect meals where I've got the lighting right and I've made it look pretty on my plate, they're the ones that I'd post, and the ones that would get more interactions and views. People were, oh, that looks nice. What's that? Not often, but you would get some feedback. So it's like that feedback loop of, oh, I need content. Food's a thing I can post every day. And then it makes you think, I'm constantly being watched. I need to make sure every meal's spot on, and it just clicks with you. Did that answer your question? I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it was really interesting actually, because I'd never really thought about that from a point of, because there's so much food content online if you go on social media, so much food content around following a certain diet, whether it's a wellness diet or it's weight loss, or whether it is something like being plant-based, whatever it is, or carnivore. We could go on, right? There's so much of that online, and I'd never actually thought about ease of that, like why that might be something that people post so much, because actually it's something that you can easily create content out of very quickly. You've got to eat every day, so there is always going to be an opportunity to create something, whereas if your content's around something different, you actually have to carve out that time to think about it, to create it, to plan it, prep it, and food's just there, accessible. In the same way that we can use food as a way of coping with emotions or comforting ourselves or regulating our nervous system, because it's just something that's easy and it's accessible. So it's a similar kind of, there's a parallel being drawn there, it sounds, from what you're saying. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, so I think the content creating part was certainly the thing that made me self-obsessive. So I was constantly critiquing myself and then projected that onto everyone else, thinking that everyone else is going to be judging what I eat, how I look. If I've posted a video of me doing a certain weight on deadlift, I need to make sure next week it's a little bit heavier to make it relevant. Why people aren't going to care if I just keep posting the same weight. So you just kind of it's not that I was chasing likes. I did find myself getting sucked into that, but I wasn't like obsessed with the likes. It was the more the obsession came with, is what I'm posting relevant? And for it to be relevant, it has to be better, has to be continuously better through the eyes of others. And that came with, did my body look better? Was the food I eating more exotic, more colourful on the plate, more balanced in its macros, all that kind of stuff that people probably weren't even thinking about. But I'd be so analytical of everything and then projecting it outwards. It all came all consuming. And that's where all the obsession started. Definitely.
It's quite interesting that you say it through the eyes of others, because that's something I think is a really, in my experience and working with lots of other people and speaking to people who have eating disorders or disordered eating, a big thing is when you're in that kind of headspace, it's about viewing yourself from an external lens. You always think about, what do I look like to others? How are they perceiving this? How do I come across? What's that? It's very much living that way rather than living from an embodied sense of self, which I think is actually interesting, because one of the ways that I feel like you helped me was, feel you helped me become more embodied. So we can come back to that later in the episode. But what I did want to ask you was, did you feel like you had issues with food before entering this industry, or is that when you actually noticed it was an issue for you?
That's when it became what I would define as disordered. Okay. I've always been like conscious that food, not always, obviously when I was a child, you get given what you're given and you eat it. But as soon as I had a job, I'd put money into buying my own food, and I'd like to cook my own little stir fries and things like that. And I've always been conscious that I can't, it's going to sound a bit strange. I've been conscious that I can't see inside myself. And I always remember as a child being very aware of that, I can't see what's inside. So I'd like to think it's clean.
That's how it felt at the time.
As a child, that's how I conceptualized it. So then when I got to like teenager, I could buy my own food and stuff. I made that choice. But it was something about keeping myself clean. So I'd want to, that's just how it all started. So I was aware what you put in your body is that you are what you eat, that kind of phrase, isn't it? But it was just general trying to look after myself.
Yeah.
But when I became a vegan, that's definitely when it became disordered, even though I'd always been conscious as such of what I was eating.
Yeah. You've never shared that with me, so that's really interesting about that. Like,
no.
Yeah. About that, not knowing what was inside you. And you're right, you do hear that growing up. I heard it growing up, you are what you eat. So I guess if you're hearing that message as a little boy, and then you were quite an anxious little boy, weren't you? Like, struggled with anxiety as a child. And I'm wondering if because you can't see what's in your body, there's an unknown, there's an uncertainty in that. And if something's not certain, we can't see something, that can add to anxiety. So I'm wondering if then when you got older and you were able to have more control of that, because you couldn't see it, you could at least in your mind try and control what that might look like inside for you.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know where exactly that came from. There was obviously, like we've just spoke about, the you are what you eat saying that gets circled around. But I feel like there's a little core memory that's just popped up of when we were doing like a science class and we were looking at bacteria through a microscope. And it was that realization that it's like an unseen world. I think that kind of was like a stemming of that. It's like a whole unseen world that I'm not aware of. And I felt like a moral obligation to look after that unseen world. So I didn't know what it was. Sounds a bit odd, but that's how I conceptualized it as my young brain. That then became like a body image like linked and bridged over to body image when I was younger. I can't remember what. No, I was older than the memory I've just explained, but younger. I'd probably been about maybe 11 or 12. And my mum one day got home from work and I was just stood on the landing. I think I just got out of the shower, so I had a towel around my waist, but I was basically had no top on. And my mum said very abruptly, I think you should start going for a run after school, Will, and stop eating so much chocolate when you get home from school. I was like, why? She's just said, your belly's getting a little bit big. Maybe you should go for a run tomorrow. And that was like the first time I was like, what? And like looking down and being like, huh? And that idea as well as, oh, I control this. That's something and I think that is my first core memory of like body image and being aware of my body and what I do affects the outwards view of my body. Whereas beforehand, it was always this little quirky idea of there's like a little like unseen world that I'm in charge of and I can control that in a nice way. But then it came a bit more serious and adulty as such.
Yeah, it's the first time you viewed your body through that external lens and viewed it to like from an aesthetic point of view of like, this is what it looks like, this is what other people might think, and that attention being brought.
People have an opinion on me as well. They judge this thing that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I went for a run the next day. I did go for a run the next day and I remember finding it quite difficult, like really out of breath, and I don't know. I just felt quite rubbish about myself. I always remember that. Yeah.
How old were you then?
I think I was about 11.
This is really interesting because hearing, like sharing our stories, it's very similar to like not the same, but my first experience of being aware of my body from an external point of view, and I've shared it on the podcast, so I won't go into loads of detail, is when I was 11 as well. And I was having a bridesmaid's dress fitting. And I remember being measured and being told, make sure that your belly is not bigger than your boobs because your belly should never be bigger than your boobs. And realizing, oh, okay, so that's something I need to control. I need to make sure it doesn't get bigger. It needs to stay smaller. And up until that point, I'd never thought of that. Like I'd never, as an 11-year-old, never even thought anything to do with my belly or my boobs or the ratio between them or that even other people might really think that about me. So
it's like the unknown standard has been pushed onto you and it's like, what, that's a thing? And then all of a sudden you find yourself having to abide by it or feeling like you have to abide by it at least.
Yeah. So in terms of when we met, I was also a vegan. I really want to make sure it's clear to all the listeners, we're not vegan bashing here at all, because I think you can be vegan from a very like grounded, moral, ethical place. And just because someone's vegan or plant-based doesn't necessarily mean it's disordered.
Absolutely.
We get hate.
I can honestly say that's how I believe I started. It was from the ethical point of view. It was just, I feel like it was maybe like the pathway for other things to take to lead me down that route, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just sharing our experiences. I have spoken to people before, and actually maybe I'll get them on as a guest at some point in the future, who have found veganism really helped them in the recovery because it helped them. And if they come on the episode, they can talk about it themselves, but it added another level of dimension to their food, which was beyond themselves. It was about animals as well. So that helped them. But what I was going to say is I was vegan when we met. And for me, it was also coming from a disordered place. I view yours as coming more from, yours was quite orthorexic. You were obsessed with the nutritional content of food, what was the health value you were getting from food. It was all about clean eating, like you say. How can I make the insides of me clean? Mine wasn't. Mine came from a really restrictive place. So I had a lot of my kind of dieting or behavior with food was about eating as little as possible. So I wasn't super focused on like the clean eating side of it. Still did try to portray this message of being healthy, but it didn't get quite into the level of detail that I think yours did. Because I remember when I met you, you were like, oh, I'm not having these oils. I'm not having mock meats. Everything was like counted with your macros and everything like that. And I have dabbled in that a bit throughout the years. It wasn't ever my thing that I latched onto too much. Mine was more about eliminating food groups. Oh, this is a bad food group. I'm just going to eliminate it because I need to have as little calories as possible. I need to restrict as much as possible. So I came in it still from a disordered place, but it was from a different angle. And this is why I think this is really interesting, because you're saying you had disordered eating at the time. You had body dysmorphia. I, at the time, also had disordered eating. Slightly different. Yours was health focused. Mine was all weight loss focused, restriction focused. We both had binging because you were binging on the foods that were quote unquote unhealthy foods. And I was binging on the foods that I thought were the naughty foods, the ones that were too calorific that I couldn't eat. So there's real parallel here. And what I find fascinating is from us meeting, we have both gone through a real significant recovery in that. And I find that fascinating because it could have been a perfect breeding ground for us to sink deeper into those beliefs and into that disordered behavior. And I think that's helpful to maybe unpack or discuss, like, why was that? And one thing that comes up for me around this that I think was helpful was because of the differences, because I think because yours was health focused and all about clean eating and mine was restriction focused. I think there was something for me in that difference that was helpful, because when you wouldn't eat a certain oil, or I remember you getting a bit shirty with me once because I'd cooked something in a certain oil. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah.
And
Sorry about
I remember being like, why does he care? I remember thinking like, oh, get over yourself. It's an oil, which obviously you might have been thinking, what? You won't eat a potato? A potato's got this nutritional content, that's nutritional content. Whereas for me, a potato was bad because in my mind, it was a carb, and a carb is bad and it's got more calories than a piece of broccoli. So that's where I was coming at it from. And another time, I think I remember cooking something with a mock meat and you had a problem with that. You didn't like that it was a mock meat. And again, I remember thinking like, why is he bothered about this or that? This has only got X amount of calories in it. So why does he care? Because you weren't looking at the calories. You were looking at what's this made of? What's the salt value in it? What's the sugar value and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't looking at that. I was just looking, it's X calories. So that's okay. And I think there was something about, because yours was so different and I didn't get that at the time, not to the same, not fully, didn't embody it in the way that you did. It helped me challenge my own beliefs because it made me think, Will's so fixed on this, I'm so fixed on that. And we both think that we are like completely right and this is the right way that you should eat. And then who is right? Like, because I believe I'm right and you believe you're right, but we can't agree on that. So maybe if I can challenge your beliefs, I can also challenge mine a little bit. It just opened up it opened up that idea of there's different perspectives here. There's different ways of viewing things. And what you believe might not be the full picture. And again, you could have said, actually, that might have then opened you up to, okay, so there's all this clean eating. So I need to add that in on top of the restriction. But it just didn't do that for me. It opened me up to just challenging the truth of what I thought.
Yeah. It's almost, as you were talking, I had an image in my head of when you've ever been like in an argument or a discussion.
Love an analogy. Go for it. Yeah.
Love an analogy on this podcast.
We do.
But if you've ever, we don't really shout argument, do we? But we've had back and forth and discussions, butting heads. And then all of a sudden, something just clicks and you realise the argument's just pointless. And you can't, what have we just spent half an hour doing?
You think, what were we arguing about at the beginning?
Yeah, something just happens and you just come out of it. So, because you both got fixed on this one side and you then realise you realise the thing that you're so attached to be anything.
Yeah, that's it.
You just chose.
You were
this
so
at that
attached to
moment.
this. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
attached to this and I was attached to that. And I was like, but we're both just attached to something.
Yeah.
And I could have been attached to that, the same as Will, but I'm not. I'm attached to this. And why is that? I could just attach to anything. So maybe I can also detach from something.
Yeah. Yeah. You realise that you're just being like tangled up in your own web. And so you just have that little moment. That's what I was thinking as you were talking anyway. But
yeah.
But I was also thinking, I totally agree with what you're saying. However, I think I must be truthful in that I believe that you were more the catalyst for my recovery than I was for yours, from my perspective at least anyway. Because
I'm not sure about that one.
go
on.
Another parallel.
That's cute, isn't it? If we both think that the other one was more of a catalyst. So go on, tell me.
Because one key thing I remember is I started to weigh all my foods again and meal prep for the whole week, which is something I hadn't done for a while. But then I restarted it. And I remember I think you come home from work or something and you were just really just like distressed in a sense by it but you were distressed because it made you feel like you weren't doing enough, if that makes sense. But seeing
because I think, go on.
Yeah. But seeing you stressed by it and being like, and seeing how it can negatively affect you and where your relationship is with your food and your body image, it made me reflect and being like, is what I'm doing positive then? Because if this thing I'm doing, I've convinced myself this is necessary and good for me on a whole scale, but someone I care about is actually it makes them like agitated and uncomfortable, makes them feel uncomfortable in where they are in their own life. It comes back to what we just said about it just depends on your perspective on these belief systems that you have. And I think that to me is like one memory I have of through you really reflecting on my own choices.
That's very sweet. That's really sweet, Will. Thank you.
If I articulated it as I wanted to, but thanks.
Yeah, you did. And I think, actually, it's really interesting because what I was going to say is I think there was was that at the point when I was still really quite in the restriction and you weighing was making me feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I need to restrict more. Or was that at the point where I was starting to move away from that and being like, and I found you weighing it triggering because I was trying to move away from that mentality?
It was during a period where you'd started to learn about diet culture and understandably, just the same as like when we first went vegan, you discover about animal agriculture and some of the horrible things that can happen. You kind of go down that rabbit hole and you get very emotional about everything. And you were, if I remember correctly, in that phase of learning about diet culture, where you just learned about this whole system of like brainwashing.
With my new identity.
Yeah. So you were just shifting from one identity to another, but this one was positive. But you coming home and then seeing me doing that, it churned up this strong emotional response.
Yeah. It's interesting. Really interesting to hear that perspective. Because actually, even though you were in this disordered eating world, another way I feel you helped me was, and it might sound like a contradiction or quite ironic, but I think it's worth mentioning is you always encouraged me to have the hearty appetite. Like when I met you, you gave me a really refreshing perspective on how a woman can look and how a woman can be. So I think I spent a lot of my life implicitly and explicitly being given the message that a woman should be smaller and she should be like delicate and fragile and She shouldn't really eat that much. She shouldn't be too loud. A feminine woman is a woman who's like petite, I guess petite, right? Petite and small, and would order a salad. And I tried to fit that for such a long time, but I'm not a petite person. I'm actually taller than Will, which he wouldn't like me to mention.
But you did anyway. You can't help yourself, can you?
Yeah, so I'm like a tall woman. I'm actually...
And I'm just a short
like,
man.
You're so short king.
Short king. There you go, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I felt like I needed to be small, and to be attractive was to be thin. And you didn't have that perspective. I remember you liked the boldness of me. There was something like when I was bold or I was a bit different or outspoken, I could see that you liked that. And when I ate, you would encourage me to eat more because you'd be like, come on, get some. It's sexy for a woman to have an appetite. I remember you actually saying that. You were like, I think there's nothing more attractive than a woman that can just really dig into her food and enjoy her food. And I was like, what? Where did this man come from? Who? What? And then I also remember you again explicitly being like, I like a woman with meat on her bones. I like a jiggle. I like a curve and fat. And that was really new for me again, because I'd never actually really heard anyone ever in my life, any of the men that I dated or been with, or any family members who were men. Not saying that men I'd been with previously had tried to make me lose weight or diet. Not necessarily. There has been some comments over the years about my body, and which sort of suggested that it should be smaller. But even with certain exes, it was never said, but there was just this feeling that I should be smaller. It was like an implicit kind of energy was there. And you just came through into my life and just knocked that out the park, because you were like, I want a big woman. I want a bold woman. I want her to have meat on her bones, and I want her to have a big hearty appetite. And that literally shook me completely, because it was such a new perspective for me to have. And it really helped, because it actually made me feel able to exhale and not have to put on that front of always trying to eat and act and be and look in a certain way, because maybe that wasn't what you found attractive either. Do you remember that at all? Does that feel familiar for you?
I do actually remember you saying, I've never had a man say they want a woman with some meat on the bones. And I remember being like, really? Like, how have you just found this small pocket of men that don't like that? Because the majority of the men in my life, they're all like, they want a woman with a bit of meat, like say meat on their bones. They encourage that. And we've had conversations with my brother as well to confirm that. It must maybe something in my family, I'm not sure, but we have a joke about it, didn't we? We had that once. But it just makes you think maybe, as they say, your energy kind of, your vibe attracts your tribe, that kind of thing. So if you believe that intrinsically from your culture and your family upbringing and what you've been told and your experiences, if you kind of just trap those people that kind of reaffirm that to you, maybe that's a bit of a tangent of thought, but
no, it's interesting. I think it was so powerful for me, so healing, because from when we first met to now, I'm like 2 to 3 sizes bigger, aren't I? And I needed to gain that weight because there was so much restriction in my past and so much over exercising. I was so undernourished that to actually go through recovery, I did need to gain weight. But I think for so long, there was such a fear of doing that, because I was worried that people were going to comment on the weight gain. I was worried about if with ex-partners, what if they don't find me attractive now if I gain weight? Or what if they leave me? Are they only with me because I look a certain way? Because they comment on my body a lot, so it means they must like it how it looks now, so it can't change. And I would fall into reassurance seeking and comparison and asking, those kind of questions, which I'm sure a lot of listeners, especially female listeners, will relate to, where you ask your partner, oh, do I look big in this? Have I gained weight? And their responses would be like, no, you look fine. Or no, you haven't gained weight. But there was still this, that in their responses, there was this kind of implicit messaging like, no, you look fine as you are now. You haven't gained weight. So if I had gained weight, would I then not look fine? Do you know what I mean? There was still a sense of like, there's a condition here that I look fine because I'm how I am now. But if I'd gained weight, that might be different. And you didn't respond like that. Your response was always really encouraging about weight gain and celebratory of weight gain. And it created such a feeling of safety in me that actually he doesn't mind if my body changes. He doesn't mind if my body gets bigger. That's okay. And it helped me take a step towards recovery, which had always felt too scary for me to do before. But I also think what was significant here is you didn't fall into reassurance traps with me. And I think that's what's can happen a lot in eating disorders is in terms of body image. When someone is asking those questions about, like I described, of have I gained weight or have I eaten too much or do I look fat? The reassurance trap is saying, no, you look fine. No, you haven't gained weight. So then that eases that anxiety, but it still creates the feeling of, if I had, that could be an issue. You never, ever did that, ever. You would always be like, why does it matter to you? Or I'm not going to comment on your body. I'm not going to do that. The only time you'd comment on my body, if it was, you would comment positively sometimes, but you would never fall into reassurance. It was, you just didn't do it. You would just be like, I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into these conversations about your body. I like your body as it is, but we're not going to compare it. We're not going to go down that route. And that was really helpful because I felt secure that you liked my body and you loved me, but I also felt like you liked me for more than that too. And you weren't going to go down that route and you weren't going to fuel those thoughts about fat being wrong or getting bigger being bad. I feel like that was quite rambly. I hope it made some kind of sense. You can probably tie it up and make a bit more clarity with that one, Will.
No, mate.
From your perspective.
Yeah, it's just sparking different thoughts. It's just, and then you go, think, which one do I want to go down now?
That's the thing with these episodes.
Yeah. But there's a couple of things that jumped out. So we both said at the start, you have this mask on. You have this perfect you mask where, like we say, you eat the perfect foods, you do the perfect routine, and everyone's like, you hope everyone's like, wow, look how good they are. And it makes you feel good. It boosts your identity and self-assurance of who you are. But I feel for us two, it was, for me anyway, you were the first person I felt that I could maybe let that mask go, but you'd still always be there for me. And I'd hope to think it was the same for you. And then maybe in those moments when we felt safe enough to drop that mask, that's where the healing and the recovery with each other would take place.
Yeah.
So, something you said earlier sparked that thought, but I'd maybe like to go down that avenue. I think that'd be something to unpack.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. In the therapeutic world, they call it like unconditional positive regard, which is something that Carl Rogers created as a concept, which was the idea of accepting another person without any conditions. You may not always agree with what they do or what they say, but there will be no judgment behind it because you still would accept them for who they are in the core. And I think that's what you're speaking about there. And that's what I felt as well from you. And I remember like looking back like years later when I was doing my therapy training and understanding the concept of UPR and thinking, this is what I got from Will. This is what I had. And this is why it was so healing and so powerful because I didn't have to, I didn't feel like you loved me or liked me or even accepted me as a friend because some of this was all happening, what we're talking about was happening before we were even in a relationship, right? Because of how I look or what I ate or my body size, I felt that you just accepted me for me. And there was many reasons why. Some of that was to do with me sharing some of experiences of binging and you just holding me through that. There was just never any judgment. You didn't fall into reassurance, but you weren't judgmental about it. You, in the past, what had happened is if I fell into like reassurance seeking behavior, either someone would follow me with it, they'd reassure me, and then it would placate, and then it would come back up another point. Or it would get into an argument, a tricky dynamic of like, why are you always asking this? What's wrong with you? Why do you care? Which is judgmental, right? You never did that. Your response was like, I don't want to go down that route because I don't think it's helpful for either of us to do that. I love you. I accept you. And that was like perfect example for me of you didn't agree with falling into that cycle, but you didn't make it about me and that I was a bad person because I was doing it. You still accepted me in that moment. Yeah, I think that acceptance. What was it I did that gave you that acceptance? Because I've given a couple of examples there of how you helped me have feel that. I don't know what it was. Because sometimes I don't think you consciously did that for me. I think it was just how you were, right?
No, I see. This might sound, no, selfish isn't the word, but quite self-absorbed in some ways. But I think I was able to do that with you and hold that space with you and not go down those roller coasters of those kind of conversations about your body image and stuff like that, because in a way I could say talking to you in those moments was almost like a mirror of myself. And I was able to I was treating you how I'd like someone to treat me when I'm having body image moments of when I felt like my belly wasn't toned enough or my shoulders were too small and all that kind of stuff that I used to worry about. And, in that photo I posted, was my chest pumped up enough? All those kind of things. And I'm a bit, maybe I didn't ask them all the time, those kind of questions, because I used to internalize things a lot more. Maybe that's just the difference between men and women. I definitely have these questions. And I definitely want to go down that route. What was the term you used? Validation seeking. Is that what you...
Yeah. Or reassurance seeking.
Reassurance. I would want to do that. I didn't always do it. But I suppose because I almost felt like I knew what you were going through, I think that helped me. I use you as that mirror and give you a response that was beneficial because I could use my own experience of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It also sounds like that allowed you to have some empathy and just some compassion for yourself. Because if you could see me falling into comparison and reassurance seeking and criticizing my body and the distress that was causing me, and knowing you experienced that yourself, I think that can help you develop some empathy or compassion to be like, when I am experiencing this, how can I talk to myself? I'm able to talk to a Becca like this. So can I talk to myself when I'm in the same way? Can I give myself the same sort of kindness when I'm going down that negative body image spiraling? Do you think it helped you with that? It's okay if you don't. You can disagree.
No, it's interesting to think about. I think me personally, I feel like more so that me being able to help you in those moments drove you more into your recovery. And then through your recovery and learning more the intellect behind these behaviors and thoughts through, like we discussed, like the fat phobia and all these kind of movements and groups and stuff, you then educated me. And then that's where I feel like if I could then understand it more intellectually. And
okay,
that's
so
where
you
most
actually...
of my recovery comes from. So that's how I think I view how we helped each other more so in that situation. So me giving you the space to then go further into your recovery meant that you could take the tools you've gained, pass them on to me.
So you felt that actually having more of a cognitive understanding of why might I feel like this about my body? Why might I have these beliefs about food? Oh, it's because of this, and understanding diet culture, understanding fat phobia, like wellness culture, all of that. It was education and insight that you gained from that then helped you actually be more able to recover.
Yeah. It wasn't just realizing it's not just me. Like, there's other people out there who have similar issues with themselves. Not to put a too horrible term, but the issues with themselves. And there's actual key words and phrases and movements, categories. It's a real thing. It's like, oh wow, it's like flips your reality, and you're like, okay, so it's not just I've just been born this way in this continuous effort to seek this body, and then I might be happy. It's, oh wow, it's just a thing. And there's loads of stuff you can learn about it, and you can start to unpack from there. But you were definitely the person that kind of pushed all that onto me through your own research and just through talking to you. It kind of slowly allowed me to unravel myself.
Yeah. It gave you a language. It gave you a language to make sense of what you were experiencing, which I think we need, because we do make sense through language. So it gave you that, but then it also gave you the opportunity through that language to see that this isn't the only truth. This is one bubble over here of how you view the world, but then there could be other different ways of viewing it as well. And also shame. It feels like in both of these, if you know, I'm not the only one who struggles with this, I'm not the only one going through this, that's really can help to remove shame. And I think that's also what I felt with you. So I was like, this man actually just accepts me for who I am. So I don't need to put a mask up. I can be myself. If I've done something that I feel not proud of, can share that because he's still going to accept me. That reduces shame. So from both aspects, I feel like there's something there about whatever was going on between us, that connection between us and this process we've been through, eliminated shame. And that really speaks to Brené Brown's work, where she says shame is created within people because that's how it's born, but then it's also healed through people. It's healed through connection. And that is how it really feels for me significant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes. Quite powerful stuff. Good.
It feels like a really poignant place to end today. Unless there's more, there is more I could talk about, but maybe we'll have to have a part 2, William.
If I'm allowed.
That's what you mean, of course you're allowed.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk a lot more. So send me the invite and I'll be here.
You've always said, haven't you? One day we'll have a podcast as team.
Yeah,
maybe this is it.
We're driving on the motorway. We have some right good chats. We're just getting started. That's been good fun.
It's been, I think.
Sorry, carry on. Oh, no.
No, I was just.
No, what was we just saying? Oh, we should do this again.
No, I think it's been really. It's felt really connecting for me, and really some really interesting things as well that I've learned about you that I don't think I did know before there either. So thank you, William.
I was trying to be open and transparent, so hopefully that happened. Hopefully I've added some value to your listeners. But it's been really good fun, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be a part of it.
Thank you for listening, everyone. If you would like Will on for a part 2, let us know in the comments, and let us know if there's anything in this that's resonated for you. I always love to hear feedback from people. It really does warm my heart. If you're one of the many men that listens secretly, I hope it's been helpful to hear a male perspective, and feel free to reach out. Thanks for listening, everyone.